Hello, welcome back to How to D&D. Well, yesterday we had a cut-off in the live stream. I'm hoping that doesn't happen today. It looks like everything's working correctly. I don't know why that was, whether it was OBS, YouTube, my hardware, Microsoft, Windows. I mean, who knows? But yeah, hopefully we have a better result with the live stream. I'm going to put up a poll, and feel free to take part in that poll. And it was all determine what I wind up doing today. And this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, give feedback. I will do my normal presentation for the basic combat mechanics. I will do a lot of demonstration. That's the intention anyway. And yeah, so my suggestion to you is grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable. Be prepared for me to ask questions. There may be the need for you to roll dice, so we'll see how that goes. And we'll proceed from there. I think that's probably the best way to look at this is we do what we can with what we've got. And yeah, I think we're almost ready to go. Let me just siphon on through to my notes. I'll be doing lots of demonstration today, as I have been trying to do in this program for a while. Anyway, let's start, since hopefully you're comfortable, you've got some food, some drink, and you're ready to go, because I'm pretty much ready to go. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Now, the topic for today is Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is lesson 2, the basic combat mechanics of the game. So if you needed help with that, that's what this is all about. The overview for today is I will cover combat initiative, what that sort of looks like, types of actions, weapon attacks, casting a spell, dashing, disengaging, the help action, dodge, search actions, using an object, and miscellaneous recommendations. Anything not here today that I have not listed is in a future live stream or lesson. Now, my objectives, like they always usually are, is to explain everything, hopefully as clearly as possible, demonstrate as much as possible, and allow you to participate in some way. Now, practice playthrough is actually probably coming in the future. I don't know how that will look, but I feel like we're getting much closer than we were before. And YouTube is certainly moving towards this, because we now have a tool called Go Live Together on mobile. And once they sort of get that sorted out and we can get like 4 or 5 people into a live stream all at once, we are ready to rock. And I'm looking forward to those days when it does actually occur. I'm going to refer you to D&D Beyond for the basic game mechanics and basic rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. You can get it free on their website. You can also download a PDF if you really prefer a PDF rather than having to have constant internet access to access it off their website. Okay, so let's talk about the first topic, combat initiative. The most common aspect of any kind of basics around battle and combat, and that's combat initiative. Normally, the Dungeon Master opens a combat encounter with a description of what the monster or the threat to the characters is. There is no point asking them to roll initiative unless you give them some information that's narrative in some way. Then they will ask you to roll initiative. This is the best way to present any kind of combat encounter, is to make sure you give them their narrative description first. Initiative rolls are special ability checks that are a result of adding your dexterity modifier to a 20-sided dice roll. Okay, that's how you do them. All the player characters and all the monsters need to make an initiative roll, and you place them in order of highest to lowest. The highest initiative will start at the first, and the lowest initiative will go last. Anyone surprised doesn't get to act or take a turn in the first round. Now, surprise is determined by making stealth checks and comparing that with perception or passive perception. I'm not necessarily going to go into that in a lot of detail. What I will say is, when you are rolling initiative for your monsters, your NPCs, Based on the type, if you only have one type, you roll one initiative for all of the creatures rather than individually. I know some people like to do this, but actually this is a lot of extra work, and unless you are willing to track every single separate initiative roll and you have a way of distinguishing every single different monster, even though you have 5 goblins, like you can have goblin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's really up to you. But I'm not going to go into that. Roll one initiative for all of the creatures. The simplest way to deal with this. Now, how do you actually make this roll? I want to make it really clear. I did say you roll a 20-sided dice, you add your dexterity modifier. In some cases, the players will have an initiative modifier, but the monsters will have a dexterity modifier. That you add those two numbers together, and that's what you get as your initiative check. Okay? Right. So we've got that sorted out. Well done. Types of actions. What sort of actions can you perform in a battle? Well, as it happens, they're broken up into various different things. This is to make sure that things are easy to work out. First is the action. This is the main thing that a creature, your character or monster can do from a wide range of possibilities. This could include anything from making an attack, casting a spell, or performing some sort of maneuver, which I will explain as we go. There's also bonus actions. This is a special type of action linked to an ability. It might be a spell or other features. And this feature states that is different from the main action. Okay, a bonus action is not the same as an action. Sometimes you will have no opportunity to use a bonus action because it's not available to you. Move is the creature's ability to change position around the battlefield by walking, running, flying, crawling, swimming, and climbing. And generally, if you're walking, you're moving at normal speed. If you're running, you're probably again moving at your normal speed. Any of the others usually means you're going to move at half your speed, unless, of course, there are special conditions. There's also the interaction. This is a quick thing or task that you can do as part of the creature's main action or part of their movement. And this can be anything from drawing a sword or stowing a sword or turning a doorknob, something like that. Okay, very, very quick, simple things. A reaction is an instantaneous response to a trigger of some kind, which can occur on a creature's turn, someone else's creature's turn. It could also occur on your own turn, but that's very rare. But it's more likely to occur on somebody else's turn. Now, the main thing to remember that when you take your turn, you can only perform one action, one bonus action, one move, and one interaction. Okay, that's it. You get one of each. And you get to perform one reaction every round, but not necessarily on your turn. Okay, all right, so that's the gist of how our actions work. The action you're probably going to use the most in combat is the one I'm about to talk about. And that is the attack types, different types of attacks. We have your melee weapon attack. These are usually made at close quarters. In fact, they are made at close quarters with a sword, an axe, a mace, and a spear. These are just examples. There are many more. Ranged weapon attacks are made at short range and long range with, say, a bow, a crossbow, a sling, or a gun. Thrown weapon attacks are made at short range with, say, a dagger, a hand axe that you could throw, a javelin, a light hammer that you would also throw, or a net. Unarmed strikes are made at close quarter, much like the melee weapon attack. But in this case, you use your fist, your feet, your elbow, your knees, your head. You might also have something else that you can do, but I'm not going to specify that because that'll be up to your imagination and how you do things at your table. So we've got most of it here, but then there's also another aspect to this, and that is casting spells. But playing in Dungeons & Dragons, there's a lot of magic usually, so let's talk about casting a spell. You can do this. Casting a spell is performed as an action normally, but there are different types of spells. They're not always an action. Sometimes they can be a bonus action. Sometimes they can be a reaction. There's a variety of different ways of doing this. But beside that, let's look at the different aspects of casting a spell, because there's different types. There's 5, in fact. Your melee attack spell. It's made at close quarters with an attack roll that targets the enemy's armor class, or AC. This could be a spell such as Booming Blade, Shocking Grasp, Inflict Wounds, Flame Blade, and Spiritual Weapon. Although Spiritual Weapon's a bit special because the melee attack is not actually, or melee attack spell that you're performing is performed from the position where the spiritual weapon is, not necessarily from where the position of your character is. Ranged attack spells are made at short range and long range with an attack roll that will target the enemy's armor class, such as Eldritch Blast, Ray of Frost, Firebolt, Guiding Bolt, Chaos Bolt. A lot of bolts involved here. Your melee saving throw spell is made at close quarters with a saving throw that will target an enemy. And what would that look like? Well, the best example of this, I would say, is Bestow Curse. Bestow Curse, there are not that many out there that involve this. Okay, so if you find yourself like kind of baffled, that's all right, because there's not a lot of them. Bestow Curse. Next, we have ranged saving throw spells. These are made at long range and short range with a saving throw that will target an enemy. They will be required to make a saving throw of some kind. These types of spells would be something like Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Sacred Flame, or as some people like to call it, Sacred Mist, Sacred Flame, Toll of the Dead. And then you have the last category of spell that you can cast, and that is the automatic success spells. They don't require you to make an attack roll. They don't require you to make a saving throw. They require no dice rolling whatsoever. They just work. And this would be a spell like Prestidigitation, which is like the Swiss Army knife of Dungeons and Dragons. Mage Hand, which allows you to use a spiritual hand to manipulate your environment. Light, which creates light. Mending, which repairs something. Message, which allows you to use a telepathic sort of communication method. Magic Missile, which actually is an attack spell, but it doesn't require an attack roll or a saving throw. As long as you can see the target, you hit the target every single time, and then you just roll damage. And then lastly, Druidcraft, which is basically the Druid's version of Prestidigitation. So those are the different ways that you can cast a spell. So there's a lot of different things out there that you can use in combat. And of course, you'll use the ones that you think are most appropriate. There are, in fact, other types of actions that you can perform during a combat to help you look at the tactical side of things. The first one is the dash action. The dash action is special. It requires that you use your main action, okay, not your bonus action, but your main action to move your character or creature at their speed. So it's basically some extra movement. So if you use your movement to move 30 feet because you have a speed of 30 feet, for example, and you decide you want to move a bit further, but you can't because you've already moved 30 feet, you can use your main action, your action, to dash. You take the dash action and it allows you to move another 30 feet, your speed. So that's how that has worked. This is good for getting out of trouble, but better for covering the battlefield quickly. Next, we have the disengage action. The disengage action is basically there to get you out of trouble. It requires that you use your main action in conjunction with your movement. Okay? So in other words, you take the disengage action before you move. This is the simplest way to see this. So a character or a monster doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity when they move away from a threatening creature. So when you're in melee range of a creature which could potentially be able to attack you if you tried to move away, you can stop that, okay, and disengage safely, move away from them without provoking that attack of opportunity or opportunity attack, whichever way you want to coin it. But you must disengage, you take the disengage action before you use your movement, otherwise it's a waste. One of the most useful techniques and tools out there is actually the dodge action. Now, if you've watched The Matrix, you probably kind of know a little bit about what I'm talking about. It's kind of the same sort of thing, just in a fantasy world. It requires you use your main action, so your character or monster is going to become more difficult to hit, okay, with any attack that's made against them. All enemies have disadvantage on attack rolls And not only that, okay, it grants you an advantage on dexterity saving throws as well. And this lasts for the entire round. So you do it on your turn, and it will last until we get back round to your turn again. So that's an entire round. That's a good thing. Dodge is probably a smarter action to use than the disengage action. So by far the most useful action, and also great if you want to bottleneck a location. So the dodge action. You apply disadvantage to your enemy's attack rolls, and you give yourself advantage on a dexterity saving throw for a whole round. Now we're not alone. When we're in a battle, we're usually with somebody else, and some people might need some help. And there is a help action in Dungeons and Dragons. So what does that look like? Well, the help action requires that you use your main action as either your character or your monster, and they can aid another creature's completion of a task. And what they do is they grant advantage to the next ability check or attack roll that that creature takes. Okay, so this is one of those things where it can get very confusing in terms of adjudicating. I'm not going to go into any of that. Okay, I'm just going to say you grant advantage to an ability check or an attack roll to whatever creature you decide to give it to. Now it's usually going to be your ally. Okay, and attack rolls obviously will apply to combat. Ability checks might revolve around outside of combat. So this is just another application. And the good thing about the help action is it's not just combat focused. It is probably one things that as a group of players they should probably do more often is use the help action wherever possible, when it makes sense. Sometimes it won't be possible. Okay, next, the search action. It's here, and we need to deal with it. I'm not a fan of the search action, but let's explain how it works. The search action requires you use your main action so that your character or monster can detect or find something that is hidden or hard to notice using a wisdom or perception check. They might also have to perform an intelligence or investigation check based on what the dungeon master thinks is most appropriate. Now the problem with taking the search action as your main action is you can't use your main action, to make an attack or cast a spell. So you have to be very sure that this is the right thing to do. So my suggestion to you is you have to weigh up the advantages of actually being able to detect something in the middle of a battle where you may be better off to wait till later on after the battle before doing a search, because the search action outside of combat is actually much more useful to you. Within combat, not usually very useful. Now, one of the reasons for using search action is to try and find a creature that is hiding, or to try and find a creature that is invisible. And this is one of the biggest problems in the game that I don't want to discuss in too much detail because I've kind of gone over it before. But the search action uses your main action. You get to make a wisdom perception check or an intelligence investigation check, okay, and you're trying to detect something that is hard to notice, invisible, or hidden. Okay, next. Last thing that I want to cover for today, and that is use an object. Use an object has confused more than a few people. I understand this. It requires that you use your main action again. You'll notice that there's a lot of things that require your main action. Now, whether it's your character or your monster, and what they're going to do with their main action when they use an object is you're going to manipulate an object, or you manipulate the environment. And the time that you would use an object as an action is when you have already used your interaction, which was one thing you can do on your turn for free. Okay, you get one of those. It's a very small thing. So if you've already drawn your weapon, but you want to actually draw another weapon, then you would have to use an object, because to draw a second weapon would actually require a second interaction, and you only get one. So you have to use your main action to do so. The only other time that you're using an object is if there's a special feature that states as such, or you have a magic item that states that using that magic item requires an action to activate it, for example, or to utilize it in some way. Use an object may apply in a situation based on what the DM decides seems appropriate. So If you've already taken your interaction and you don't have that free action left to use anymore, or the Dungeon Master deems that the task you're trying to perform requires too much effort and too much time to actually perform, and you can't use your reaction to do this. Maybe it's a door that is jammed shut, and to actually barge your way into the door to open it up will require you to use an action to do so. So use an object comes into play. Or maybe the lever that you're trying to pull on is simply too heavy to just say we can use an interaction, so we're going to use an object, use our main action to activate the lever. There are lots of different situations that can arise. These are deemed by your Dungeon Master based on what they think makes sense. So that's use an object. Use an object in combat is something you probably don't want to use unless you really have no other choice, because combat's usually finished between 1 and 3 rounds. So that means you have 1 to 3 turns to do something before it's over. But there are times when you absolutely need to use an object, and maybe to escape you need to activate the lever to lift the portcullis so you can run away. Now, whenever I do one of these things, I always want to give you some miscellaneous recommendations, and I'm going to do the same thing today. Here are my miscellaneous recommendations when it comes to the basics of combat mechanics. When you are unsure what to do or apply in combat, the easiest thing to do is to look at what they're trying to do in that battle and decide, is it appropriate to make an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw? Because whatever they're trying to do, it's going to be one of those 4 things. Once you've figured that out, ask them to roll a 20-sided dice if there's a chance for failure. If there's a chance for failure, then we're going to make one of these 4 checks. Figure out what the difficulty class should be based on whether you think it's an easy task, a moderately hard task, a medium task, a hard task, very hard, or near impossible. So figure out what the DC should be based on what you think makes sense, and that's what they're aiming for. If it's an attack roll and a saving throw, we have mechanics built around things to deal with that already. Okay, so that's that. Now, what happens if an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw doesn't seem to make sense? One, because what they're trying to do in the battle or combat is, well, there isn't any chance for failure, or the chance of failure is so great that it doesn't make sense that a dice roll would be able to change that. So otherwise, if there is no dice roll making sense in the situation, you can allow automatic success based on what they're trying to do. So you don't worry about any of those 4 checks that I talked about. You just give them automatic success. If what they're trying to do is so ludicrous and so impossible that it makes no sense that they have a chance to succeed on it, then tell them that it automatically fails. Okay? What makes sense? The game of Dungeons and Dragons is built around you can try to attempt everything. Okay? That doesn't mean it will work, but you can attempt to try anything. That's the whole concept. It doesn't mean that anything has a chance of success. So that's my advice to you when it comes to running your basic combats in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I hope that this was useful to you, and if it was, this is very good. I'm glad. This is the whole purpose. If you have questions, use the comment section. If you have any feedback you would like to give, this is a good time to do it. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, give me a second, and we'll get to the chat. All right, let's have a look here. Back to my face. And I think we're there. Yep, let's have a look at what we've got here today. Okay, so she's quiet day today. Hello. How is everybody? I'm hoping that the stream is working well. If it is working well, that's good news. Let's have a look at our poll first before I say hi to everybody. 12 votes. Do you need help understanding the wizard class features for Dungeons & Dragons 5e? 58% said yes. Okay, interesting. I wasn't too sure. So I'm toying with the idea of at the end of my presentation with this, particularly when it's around combat and magic, to demonstrate a particular character class's features. Not necessarily the subclass features, because I'll be aiming for the stuff that's part of the main class. That's not to say I'm not open to looking at some of the subclass stuff. But there's so many subclasses, so it gets very complicated. So we'll see how we do. And this is live, so it's very possible I could make a mistake if I'm not careful. Okay, no, 17%. Good to know. Great. And then undecided, 0%. And then we've got just watching, 25%. Well, those of you who are just watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for responding. Hello, Seeker. Hello. Now, Seeker is supporting the channel in a way that he doesn't want to share, which is fine. Seeker, tomorrow we are doing Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Okay, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. I'm going to do a flip through, or should I show you the entire book thing, basically, and tell you what I think. I've not looked at the document at all. Yes, now, so Seeker, yes, the Warlock character creation stream did break last night. I don't know why it broke. As I said, I think it could have been OBS. OBS seems to be all right. It could have been OBS. It could have been Windows. Could have been YouTube. I was having trouble on my phone keeping up with what was going on in the chat. So it could have been that. It could have been my hardware. I think ultimately what it might have been is and this is just me guessing, is the interaction between Windows and OBS. I think that's what took place. I think Windows and OBS clashed, something happened there, and it all fell apart. It would not be the first time that Windows has interacted with software on my computer and balls things up. But this is the first time that this has happened while I've been live streaming in 4K. And as you know, there's nobody else in the D&D and RPG community live streaming in 4K. So I feel like we did all right. And we got most of the character built. Okay, Nacho Man, hello, a patron of the channel. Look, one of the best ways to support me to ensure this class continues is Patreon. Okay, this is where everything goes. This is what actually ensures that the live stream classes continue. Okay, support there. You know, if you're expecting, but I don't get something off Patreon, you are, by supporting these, by doing that, you make sure that I keep doing these things. Okay. The GM Radiator. Hello, how are you? Big Clue, how are you doing, Big Clue? Fred, great to catch a live stream. I'm glad you were able to make it. Norok, also a patron. Hello, how are you? Dungeons and Chronics, hello. Hello, Travis Bassett, how are you doing? Melee attacks based on strength, add the strength modifier. Does that sort of thing happen with magic attacks? Magic attacks are calculated a particular way. So, Travis, your first question, we will address your first question using the battle mat and my my whiteboard and my black pen. Okay, so your first question, that's how we're going to address that question. And just give me a second. Seeker, what do you got here? Dragonlance, I'm here for the spicy takes. Haha. Well, you know, I don't know that spicy takes are useful. You know me. I just say what I think makes sense. And I do Dungeon Master, so I know what I'm looking for. I've never run Dragonlance as a campaign. I have run dragons in a campaign before, and had players on dragons, so be interesting. What time will the live stream for the Dragonlance be? Okay, Toto Sauron. So whatever time we started today, it's 2 hours earlier. So for me in New Zealand, it would be, okay, so right now, it would be 10 a.m. in New Zealand time. Okay, so that means if we are, yeah, well, you don't need to buy the Dragonlance yet because you're going to get to see the entire thing tomorrow. I will show you the entire book and talk about it. So that's the time frame in New Zealand, 10 a.m. Okay, I do that for a very specific reason. Then, if we are looking at the rest of the world, it's a little bit more complicated. And if I remember right, on Patreon, I did have a nice little explanation of the time frame, because I had to update it because of the time frame changes. So let's have a look. If I can find it, I can just read it off there. Here we go. Here we go. North America. This is the time frame that it would be. I don't know which one is yours. So it will be Thursday for you in North America. These are the North American times. And so Dragonlance will be taking place on Thursday. Pacific Standard Time, it would be 1 p.m. Is it Mountain Standard Time or Mountain Daylight Time? I don't know. That would be 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, it's 3 p.m. I think now. And then Eastern Standard Time, or is it Eastern Daylight Time? I think it's Eastern Standard Time, would be 4 p.m. So if you're in Miami, 4 p.m. If you're in Chicago, 3 p.m. If you're in, I don't know, somewhere, the mountains, it's 2 p.m. If you're in California, then it's 1 p.m. So that's just can coincide with what I can get done. So that's how that's working, if you are curious. Okay? All right. Right, so let's get to Travis's question, which is, basically he wants to know, how does a magic attack get performed? Okay, so magic attacks have a couple of different ways they can be performed. And when we're talking about a melee attack for a spell, there are 2 ways that can be done, as I just mentioned. So let's go to my little table and show you what I mean. All right, so first off, we're going to start off with a melee attack. Okay, a melee attack. Now, I'm going to assume with this situation that what we're dealing with here is a character who's level 1. I'm going to just use the wizard from the pre-made the pre-made character sheet from the original Dungeons and Dragons starter set. They have a spell attack modifier of 5, so that will apply whether we're using a ranged attack or a melee attack. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with there. Now, given our situation, if we're dealing with a character who they're up close with, say we got this character here, here's a wizard, and here's our say shadow, and we want to touch them with a spell. Now the spell that we use, there are a few different options out there for a melee spell, of course, and the one I'm going to select is the one you're probably going to come across the most, and we're going to go with Shocking Grasp. Shocking Grasp is a good example of a melee attack spell, okay, and we'll use that one. So with this, it's very simple. I need to roll a 20-sided dice, just like we're making an attack with a weapon. So roll a 20-sided dice. Whatever I roll on that, I add to my spell attack modifier. Okay, that comes out as so I rolled a 4, so that comes out as a 9. I then compare that 9 with the armor class of my shadow. Armor class of a shadow is a 13. That's a 13. So 13, is it 13? No, 12. 12. So that fails to hit. So we do no damage. If it had actually hit, then I would then roll the damage for my my Shocking Grasp. And at first level, it would be just an 8-sided dice that I would roll. Okay? So that's your melee spell attack against a target. Now, if I wanted to make a ranged attack against a target, so let's say our wizard is over here or whatever, and we've got some creatures standing over here, and we want to actually shoot it with a spell rather than use a Shocking Grasp, which is up close. You have to touch them. We'll use something like Firebolt as an example. Firebolt's a good spell. I use it quite a lot myself, and for the life of me, oh, there we go, there's my rubber, so we'll get rid of this. The 5 still remains, so we still use exactly the same number for the melee as we do for the ranged. That's the difference between using a weapon and using spell attacks, okay? Whether it be melee or ranged. So ranged attack. Okay, ranged attack. This is for spell casting. We're doing our Firebolt. And in this case, what we do is, again, we roll our 20-sided dice. We target our creature. It's within range. That's what we want to hit, that shadow. make an attack roll, rolling a 20-sided dice, get an 18. 18 plus 5, 23. So 23 will succeed. You need to get equal to or greater than the armor class of the shadow. The armor class of a shadow is 12, so that succeeds. So now we get to roll damage. Now the damage for Firebolt is a D10. If we're casting it at the lowest level, and we're only level 1, then it would be quite low. So we just get a D10. So it's a D10 for Firebolt. Whatever we rolled, we don't add anything to it. It's just a 10-sided dice. That's the 10-sided dice. Roll it. I got a 9, so we get 9 points of damage, okay, on our shadow. And provided our shadow is not resistant, or and they are unfortunately resistant to fire damage, so yes, and it's going to mean that our fire damage probably won't do quite as much damage to our creature as we wanted. So instead of it being 9 against a shadow, it's going to do 4 points. So we do half as much. So we round down. So it would be 4.5, round down to 4. 4 points of damage on our shadow with a firebolt. So that's all attack rolls. That's your melee attack roll and your ranged attack roll. But there's also another type of melee attack that you can make, and that is the melee attack that is a saving throw. Okay, so that's a little bit different. So let's have a look at how that works. And you'll notice, you'll find that when you're using spell casting, you'll never be using the strength modifier. Okay, you never use the strength modifier. You'll either be using your intelligence modifier, your wisdom modifier, or your charisma modifier, because all the spellcasters use those stats for spell casting. Right, so a melee save. Okay, this is a melee save throw. Now, in this situation, our character that we're going to use this character here. They need to be very, very close, so we'll put them back up and right up in front of each other. Their DC is a DC 13, because level 1 character's probably only got a 13. This character's only got a level 13, a DC of 13. And the calculation for that is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your spell casting modifier, which will either be, as I said, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Okay? All right, so who makes the saving throw? Well, it's the shadow that has to make the saving throw. What sort of spell would we be casting if we were doing this? Now, you remember how I mentioned there's only really one that I can think of, because there are so few that are melee saving throws in the game, and that is Bestow Curse. Bestow Curse is probably the only one. And this thing requires you to make it's a touch spell, and you have to make a wisdom saving throw, or you could become cursed. So what we will do is we'll see if our shadow can make a wisdom saving throw. The saving throw for our shadow, it doesn't have a specific saving throw for wisdom, so we just use the modifier, which is 0, since it's only got a 10. So 0 plus whatever we roll on the 20-sided dice is what our shadow gets, to see if they can resist having Bestow Curse cast on them. Now, Bestow Curse is a slightly higher level than just level 1, if I remember right. So don't worry too much about the maths in this, okay? All right, so 17. So we've got a 17, so they succeed. 0 and 17 is 17, so we succeed, okay, rather than fail. So the effect on them is going to be fairly minimal, okay? If they had failed and got less than 13, then they fail, okay? You succeed if you get equal to or greater than the DC. That's how it works. You also get saving throws that are not in melee, and that's at range. Now, you didn't specify asking that particular question, so I'm not going to address the idea of making a saving throw at range unless you want that. Okay, I think that's probably the best way. So Travis, you will let me know in the chat now if I've answered the question appropriately. Did you get the information you wanted out of there? I think that's the best demonstration I can make out of this whole situation. Does it make sense? Magic attacks and weapon attacks are calculated differently. Okay, they're using different things. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back to where I was, my face, and I'm about to go through the wizard, by the way, for those of you who are unaware. That's what I needed. Brilliant. Okay, thanks for the explanation. So clear and appreciate the visuals. Good. All right, so we've got Travis on the right track. Great news. If there's anybody else who has questions, place them now before I start doing my little demonstration stuff. Okay, because I'm going to be focusing it on the wizard for today for the ones that I wanted to demonstrate. If you wanted me to demonstrate something else, you kind of need to say so. Otherwise, I just won't do it. You know what I mean? So anyway, so what I thought I would do is I would break down the wizard bit by bit. Where was it? Okay. All right, cool. Let's get into the map back again. As I said, we'll deal with the wizard. Now with the wizard, this is what I'm planning to do, is I'm going to go through each feature step by step and explain it. I'm going to use visuals to help explain the process to you. And probably the worst aspect of something like a wizard is trying to understand how spells work. Now, if you have a look at the wizard table, it will show you a table that says cantrips known. Cantrips are 0 level spells. Cantrips are something that you can cast as many times as you like. Okay, that's a cantrip. Cantrips for a wizard. Wizard. Now, first level, you don't get very many. In fact, you get very few. You only get a grand total, unfortunately, when you start out, of 3. So you have to be very sure about what you want. Since you only get 3, you have to make sure that the spells that you want to select are the ones you're going to keep using, because you probably won't get to change them out all the time unless you have a dungeon master who allows this. I'm not a fan of doing that sort of thing. Why? Primarily because it doesn't make sense. These are spells you're supposed to have learned so well that you can cast them an infinite number of times. You don't use the upper spell slot for them. You just know them like the back of your hand. So it doesn't make sense that they be swapped out for me, but this is beside the point. This is how it works currently. So you get to use your cantrips as many times as you like, and you pick 3. If I was a wizard, I'd probably pick something like Firebolt. Firebolt would probably be one of my top picks. If I wanted to pick another cantrip that I would use a lot, then I'm probably going to look at some of the more utility-based ones. Like I would pick something like Mage Hand. Like that would be one of my next favorites to go and pick up if I want to do anything like this. And then probably one of my next favorites in terms of a cantrip that I would pick up if I wanted to is I'd go for probably Minor Illusion, or I also really like Prestidigitation. Prestidigitation is great. So Minor Illusion or Prestidigitation, okay, depending on your preference. They're all very good. So that's at first level, right? But after first level, you get more. So at 4th level, okay, you get to have 4 of these, which means you need to choose another cantrip. And you may decide when you're looking at your cantrips and making your selection, well, I didn't get the spell that I wanted before. I can now get Prestidigitation. I can pick that one up. I didn't have it before, but now I can select it. Okay, that's at level 4. And the process, you follow the chart and you'll see, okay, how many you get. And ultimately in the end, okay, when you finally complete what you're doing with your character advancement, at level 10, you'll get 5, and that will be it. So you need to decide what you're going to take at level 5 for your spellcaster. What will it be? Is there something else that you feel that you need to have? Maybe you decide that I actually need to have another attack spell. Or maybe you decide I want another utility-based spell. I know some people like to take Shocking Grasp when they get to level 10. Okay, and that will be the limit for your wizard. You can't get any more after that. That's your limit. So you have to be very sure about what you're selecting. And if you're unsure, then don't take it, okay? But yes, that would be how the cantrip works in Dungeons and Dragons. So let's just say we take our Shocking Grasp as our 5th cantrip for the day. So that's our cantrips. We have selected 5 once we got to level 10. And we don't need to memorize them because we know them like the back of our hand. So we're done. So that's cantrips for our wizard. But, of course, we're not finished. There are other spells. Now, there's another aspect to this. These are spells that aren't using the 0 level spells. They're not cantrips. We actually have to learn these spells. Not only do we have to learn these spells, we have to have them in our spell book. We also need to make sure that we differentiate what we know from what is prepared and what we can actually cast. Do you know what I mean? All right. Now, here we go with this. This is probably, I've explained this before in a live stream before, and I can assure you it's a pain in the ass. So just bear with me while I explain this to you, because it's not easy. So if you find it confusing, I totally understand. So we're going to start off with level 1. We're a wizard. So wizard. So they're called known spells. Known spells. It's not known. Known spells. Now, known spells are the spells that you know that are in your spell book. If you don't know them, they're not in your spell book. Okay? In other words, you've learned these things, you've picked them up, and you've had to put them into your spell book. And at first level, when we get this, okay, we get a certain number of spells. Our spell book at level 1 contains 6 spells. We get 6 spells that we know. That's all we get at level 1. As we level up, we get more spells. And surprisingly, we don't get a small number of spells. We get a reasonable number of spells. Each time we level up, we're going to get more spells. How many spells do we get when we level up from level 1? Well, as it happens, it's nice and simple. You get 2 more spells, okay? So that means we get 2 more spells that we will know. That's it. Nothing more. All right, so 2 more spells at level 2. Then we go to level 3. How many more spells do we get? We get 2 more spells. That's right. That's how many spells we get. We get 2 more spells. Now, those are the ones that are written into your actual book. Okay? So this is how we learn our spells. And as long as you understand that, your known spells, the spells in your spell book, you're doing all right. If you're still confused by that process, I can understand it, because we're going to have to break it down, because there's a different category outside of our spell book. Okay? So 2 spells that we know. At level 3, we get another 2 spells that we know, that we can put in our spell book. That means at level 3, we should have a grand total of 10 spells in our spell book. Correct? Okay. All right, so there's another thing that differentiates it. This is a smaller category of known spells. There's a certain number of spells that you can prepare. So from those spells, you have to read the spell off the spell book to actually memorize it every day, at the start of every day, because we're using Vancian magic, where every time you cast a spell, you kind of forget that spell. So you have to rememorize it every day. Okay, so what we do is we prepare the spell from the spell book that we have. How many spells do we get? You can prepare the list of spells that you want that are available to you to cast based on whatever is in your spell book, and it's going to be equal to your intelligence modifier and your wizard level. Okay, so a couple of things to think about here right now. We're dealing with our intelligence modifier and our spell level. So let's get rid of this little bit here. I'm going to rub this out. Spell knowns is not what we're dealing with now. Okay, don't worry about that bit. Now we're dealing with preparing. Preparing spells. Now our wizard here, let's say our wizard is level 1. Okay, so that's part of our formula. So we get 1 spell plus our intelligence modifier. Let's say that our wizard here is the same wizard from the starter box set for the Lost Mine of Phandelver, the original starter box set. At level 1, they would have a intelligence modifier of +3. So we add the intelligence modifier of 3, which means we get to have 4 prepared spells. We do not need to worry about preparing cantrips, only our first level spells. Does that make sense? So out of the 6 spells that we know from our spell book, 4 of those we will be able to cast during the day. It's as simple as that. So out of the 6 spells that we had, that we know, we will only get to prepare and potentially use 4 of those spells. Does that make sense? So only 4 of those spells are we actually going to be able to cast. So you have to be very careful about what you choose. Now that's preparing a spell. Now what if we go to level 2? You remember how I said at level 2, okay, we would have 8 spells in our spell book, right? 8 spells. So that's 8 spells here. We have 8 spells in our spell book. How many spells will we be able to prepare? Well, it's our intelligence modifier, which is 3, and our wizard level is now 2. Comes out at 5. Instead of 4, we get 5. So we get to prepare from the 8 spells in our spell book, we can prepare 5 of those spells at level 2. Is it starting to make sense? All right, so what if we were level 3? Well, at level 3, we determined, right, that we actually have 10 spells in our spell book. Based on a level 3 wizard would have 10 spells. So out of our 10 spells in our spell book, how many spells do we get to have? Well, we get rid of that 2. We're not level 2 now, we're level 3. Plus our 3 for our intelligence modifier means we get a 6. So 6 is now the number that we can prepare. So from the 10 spells in our spell book, we can select 6 of those to cast during the day. Those are our choices. We get out of those 6. The other 4 in the spell book, we won't be able to do anything with. We just leave them alone. Okay? All right, so that's sort of relatively simple, correct? We've got our known spells, we've got our prepared spells, but then there's another thing that makes it more complicated, and unfortunately it's called spell slots. Would you believe it? Could it not get more complicated? Yes, it can, unfortunately. This is the nature of wizards. It has always been that way. To a certain degree, it's got more complicated with 5e, but they've never been that easy to understand. So, we have spell slots. Okay, spell slots. How does this look? You just look at the table. It tells you exactly how many spell slots you have. That actually means that actually determines how many spells of a certain level you can cast. So at first level, I can cast 2 spells, and they're only first level because that's all that's available to me. So out of the 10 spells that I know, out of the 6 spells that I know in my spell book at level 1, and out of those, I only get to prepare 4 of them. Out of the 4 that I've prepared from my spell book, I will only get to cast 2 spells. It could be the same spell, or it could be one of the other 4 spells that I have prepared. So each time we look at this, we're going down in terms of the subgroup changes. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So, for example, if I have certain spells prepared at first level, such as mage armor, for example, and I've also got detect magic, and I've got shield, and I've decided I also would like to have comprehend languages, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and I would like to have identify, and well, I need something to attack with as well. Is there no do I not have magic missile here as well at level 1? Yes, I do. I have magic missile. Okay, so I'm going to take magic missile as well. Right. These here are all very low spells. They are first level spells. Now hopefully I can make this all work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the spells that are in my spell book at level 1. But I decided, well, actually, it makes no sense for me to do this in a way that will make my life more difficult. I need to be able to access as many of those spells as possible. So what I decided to do, I'm a ritual caster. A wizard is allowed to cast a ritual spell with a ritual tag is by taking 10 minutes and doesn't use up a spell slot. So I decided I'm not going to take detect magic. I'm not going to prepare to detect magic because it is a ritual and I could cast it at a different time. So out of the 6, I decided to take that off. I'm not going to prepare that one. And I'm not going to prepare comprehend languages because it's also a ritual, but instead I will prepare these 4 spells. Out of these 4 spells, I can only cast 2 of those. And I decide, in a battle, suddenly somebody hits me, so I decide I'm going to cast Shield. And I've already cast Mage Armor at the beginning of the day, so I don't get to use those 2 spells that I prepared. And then I have to take a rest before I can get any spell slots back. That's essentially what it looks like at level 1. And all you do is take what I just described to you and apply it to the different levels. So that's how that part of the wizard works, which I know it's very confusing, but hopefully it made sense. Can you explain how a wizard can cast spells higher than his level via a scroll? You can't. So Nacho Man, if you are a wizard and you try to cast a spell higher than your level, you can't. It isn't possible. You have to be able to cast that level spell to be able to cast it from a scroll. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong, somebody will try to correct me, I'm sure. Then I will have to do some research and look it up. But I can assure you that if you cannot cast the spell at that level, you can't cast it from a scroll. You have to wait until you get to the appropriate level. It's too complicated for the wizard to actually understand how to do so. So it doesn't work that way. That's my understanding of how the wizard works. I know there are some debates on the internet about that. I'm not going to get into them. I don't get into debates that are crazy shit. Okay, so and there's way too much crazy shit on the YouTube forums as it is, and on the internet and YouTube comments. So yes, I don't want to get involved in that one. All right, so that answered your question. Great. So let's have a look at another aspect of our wizard that we probably are maybe a little bit confused about. We've explained known spells, prepared spells, and spell slots and how they work. Another factor that we can incorporate into our game with our wizard is ritual spells. Now the thing about a ritual spell, and it's special towards a wizard because a wizard's got a much better set of options when it comes to this. It means that when you're selecting your spells, you're probably better off to select as many ritual casting spells as possible. Why is that? It's because you can cast a wizard spell as a ritual if that spell has the ritual tag on it and it's in your spell book, okay? And you don't have to prepare that spell. So as long as you have the spell in your spell book, you can just use your spell book to cast it as a ritual, which means it will take 10 minutes plus the casting time. So if the casting time is an action, okay, then you're going to take 10 minutes plus that action. And this is why it's very smart for a wizard to pick up as many of the first level ritual tag spells as possible, because it essentially means that you have access to a lot more spells throughout your day, even though you can't necessarily cast them in combat. They're non-combat focused stuff, but they achieve a lot. This is why I've always encouraged people to try to focus less on combat with a wizard. One of the benefits of a wizard is that you have the ability to do a lot more. So that's what it is. You don't have to prepare it. You just have to have known the spell, which means it's in your spell book, and you can use it. It just takes you a bit longer to cast the spell. Okay, your spell casting focus. Basically, the spell casting focus, all that does is replace your spell component pouch. Okay? So your spell casting focus. Now, spellcasting focus could be a wand, a rod, a crystal, an orb, a staff, a little stave. There's lots of different things you can use. A lot of people would like to have their spellcasting focus be their spell book, which it's fine. I mean, you can probably make it be anything you like, as long as you've predetermined with your dungeon master what it's going to be. So that's how that works. Now, you're probably thinking, what about my spell book? Now, the thing about your spell book is you can put in more spells outside of leveling up. And that's the great thing about a wizard. In other words, you can learn a lot more spells than any other class just because of that spell book. Never lose the spell book. Make sure you have a backup if you can. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, first off, when you're doing this, every time you find a spell in somebody else's spell book or in something like a scroll, because you can use a scroll and transfer the information from the scroll into your spell book, it's going to cost you some stuff, okay? So for every level of the spell, it's going to take you 2 hours, okay? And for every level of the spell, it will cost you 50 gold pieces. Now, the idea being is you do this sort of thing during downtime, when you're no longer in the middle of an adventure, when you have access to them. This is why wizards like to find spell books, or find somebody they can copy spells from, or find spell scrolls. So for every level is going to be 2 hours. Every level it's going to be 50 gold pieces. So that means if we're dealing with a first level spell, it's going to take us a total of how long? 2 hours. Okay, 2 hours, first level spell. First level spell, 2 hours. If we're dealing with a second level spell, it's going to take us 4 hours to actually make that happen. Plus, we're going to have to spend 100 gold pieces. If we find we've got a spell we want to put into our book and it's going to be a level 3 spell, then it's going to take us 6 hours and 150 gold pieces. And so forth and so forth. So that's how you get more spells into your spell book if that's what you're after. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Now, let's have a look here. Anything in the chat that I need to keep an eye on? Like the back of your mage hand. Fair enough. You like the back of my mage hand. Cool. Untrue. Page 20 of basic rules. Make a check DC is 10 plus the spell level. Basic rules. Page 20 of the basic rules. You're talking about the player's handbook, page 20. Page 200. Basic rules. Well, what book is the basic rules? Are you talking about the player's handbook, or I'm talking about another book? I don't know where you're getting the page 20 of the basic rules. What basic rules are we talking about, dude? I don't understand what you're talking about here at all. Are you talking about the Dungeon Master Guide? Big clue? Are you talking about the Dungeon Master Guide? Because, yeah, I've got no reference point. So you're referring to page 200 of the basic rules, and yet what basic rules are you talking about, dude? Because if you look at the basic rules on D&D Beyond, it doesn't have a page number. So I don't know where you're coming from here. Do you know what I mean? So you need to be referring back to, instead of looking at the basic rules, how about pulling a source from an actual printed book where we can actually look at a page? Because the basic rules don't have page numbers in them. as far as I remember. So yes, I don't know how useful that's going to be to us. So yeah, I'm going to leave that as a reference, because that reference doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, Big Clue, but yeah, you have to give us a reference point with an actual book involved, because D&D Beyond does not have page numbers, and the basic rules are, you talking about the PDF that you've printed out a long time ago? Is that what you're talking about? I mean, yeah. I don't know how I'm supposed to refer to that, because I don't even, do they even have it as a PDF nowadays? So in other words, yeah, a reference to a book that to a product that I don't understand what you're talking about. So yes, so we're going to leave that. If I'm wrong, then somebody will give me the actual page number to a real book, because that's not a real book as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so next, moving on with our wizard, arcane recovery. Arcane recovery, probably one of those things where you used to forget about it all the time. Like, oh, what's the deal with arcane recovery? Arcane recovery allows you the opportunity to regain some spells when you take a rest. Now, the type of rest that you take is a short rest, which is really useful because it means you don't have to take a long rest. It also means you get a few spells back, and there is a way of figuring that out. So you get to regain a certain amount of your magical power once per day when you finish a short rest. And you can choose to regain some of your expended spell slots. Remember, the spell slots, the level 1, 2, 3 and upward spells, not the cantrips, the ones that you've used up. Okay? How many do you get? You get spell slots equal to a combination of your level that is half. Okay? So if I am, and we're going to round up, if I'm level 1 as a wizard, level 1 wizard, how many spell slots do I get back? I get a level 1 spell slot back. That's it. Does that make sense? This is how many spell slots I get back. This is the level of our wizard. Okay. Now, we're rounding up. Why? Because it would be half. Half, you can't have half. We're not rounding down, rounding up. So since it's half, it goes to a 1. If we're level 2 as a wizard, half of 2 is 1. So you only get 1 when you take a short rest when you're level 2 as a wizard. Because we're rounding up, and there's nothing to round up at this point. Also, any of those slots that you do regain at higher levels, none of the slots you get back will ever be higher than level 6. That's it. Okay. If I'm a level 3 wizard, where is level 3? Level 3. So level 3 wizard uses arcane recovery during short rest. How many do I get back? Okay, so remember, it's 1.5, half our wizard level. Okay, it's the wizard level, it's not the character level. Okay, so don't get confused. If you're multi-classed, you must halve your wizard level. So half of that is 1.5. So we round up, 1.5 becomes 2. So level 3, we get 2 slots back during our short rest as part of our arcane recovery. Now, moving on to the next one, if we were to be level 4, half of level 4 is 2 again. Okay? If we're level 5 as a wizard, we get 2.5, which we round up becomes 3. That's how many. So we could have, if we wanted to, because now we're still dealing with more than one slot here, it doesn't have to be a level 1 slot. It could be, you might decide that what I would prefer to have is 3 level 1 slots out of that. 3 level 1 slots. That would be fine. Yep. Or I could have a level 2 slot, if I can cast a level 2 spell, and a level 1 slot. That would add up to 3. If I'm level 6, I would get 3. Same sort of thing going on. So that's how arcane recovery works in your game. Hopefully we are making some progress. I believe we are. Okay, now that I've covered this, let's do, I think, one more before I take a break. Let's look at, is it one more? Shall I do one more or 2 more? No, we'll do 2 more. as part of our basics for our wizard, we get a thing called spell mastery. Now, for those of you who don't understand how spell mastery works, I totally get it. I understand. So let's explain how spell mastery works. Spell mastery. It's a very useful feature. So we get this when we're 18th level. You have to achieve, now when we say 18th level, you need to be an 18th level wizard, okay? You don't get it otherwise. If you've multi-classed, you have to have 18 levels in wizard. Otherwise you don't get this thing, yep. So it means you achieve mastery over certain spells that you can cast at will. So you get to choose one first level spell, so you get one first level spell, okay, and you get a second level spell. These spells, okay, they need to be in, you need to choose a 1 and a 2 that is in your spell book. These spells, 1 and 2, level 1, level 2, they must be already in your spell book. You don't get to add them to your spell book. They have to already have been there. And you can choose to cast these spells at their lowest level without expending a spell slot. That means that I can cast a level 1 spell without using a spell slot. And I can also cast a level 2 spell without using a spell slot. Okay? I don't have to... Now, the other aspect of this is you can cast those spells at their lowest level without expending a spell slot, but you have to have them prepared. They have to still be prepared. So you still have to have prepared them during the day. So it's essentially two free spells. If you want to cast any of these spells at a higher level, you must expend a spell slot as normal. Okay, and you can by spending 8 hours in study, you can exchange both of these spells, so they don't have to stay the same ones. So I might decide that my best choice is I want to have a level 2 spell, I want invisibility. And my level 1 spell that I actually want to be shield. Okay? Which is all good. Nothing wrong with that. Those are your selections, that's what you get. But if I want to change them out, I need 8 hours to do so. Yep. And I get to use those spells. I get to use them once without using a spell slot. So it's a reasonable feature, I suppose. 18th level, I personally think that for an 18th level feature, something like this is a lot of nonsense, frankly. But that's how spell mastery works. Okay, the last one, before I go and take a break, is signature spell. So let's get rid of this. You're probably never going to get to use these features. Very few people wind up playing at high level for very good reasons. So signature spells. All right. So you get that at level 20. You have to have 20 levels in Wizard, nothing else, to gain and master this. You gain mastery over 2 powerful spells and can cast them with little effort. So choose 2 third-level spells. That means 2 third-level spells. Okay. In your spell book as your signature spells. So in other words, when you pick those spells, they need to be different spells. Okay. I know a lot of people look at this and they think, oh, that doesn't mean I get to have 2 fireballs. You always have these spells prepared. So when you select your signature spells at 3rd level, you can always have them prepared. They don't count against the number of spells you have prepared. Okay. So in other words, although these spells are always prepared and they add to the existing list of prepared spells that you have. As long as it's already in the spell book, it becomes one of your prepared spells. These will never change, these 3 level 3 spells. These 2 level 3 spells. Okay? And you can cast them each once at 3rd level without using a spell slot. And when you do so, you can't do so again until you finish a short or a long rest. So you need to take a short or a long rest before you can cast these again. But this is basically a free level 3 spell, another 3 level 3 spell. So you could have Fireball, and you could have something like Lightning Bolt. So maybe you have Lightning Bolt and Fireball, both level 3 spells. It means you can cast both of those once without using a slot at level 20. And then when you take a short rest or a long rest, you get them back again and you can do it all over again. Okay? If you cast any of these spells at a higher level, you must use a spell slot up. You don't get them for free. So that is how signature spells work for a wizard. Hopefully that was simple enough. I'm kind of curious as to how the chat is responding to all of this. So far we seem to be reasonably happy. Good, sweet. Let me go back to my face and briefly I will just say we are ready for a halfway point. I think this is a good point to take a little bit of a quick break. There was a question around casting spells at higher levels from a scroll, and unless there's an actual page number in a real book that exists, then yeah. So far, I haven't seen anybody be able to present evidence as far as I can see. Now, I believe in the past you could do that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure in the past you could cast a spell at that was higher than your level in older versions of the game. And my understanding is in 5e you can't do that. But if somebody can find a page number in one of the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master Guide that says otherwise, sweet, present it. But yes. Chapter 10 of the basic rules in D&D Beyond. So let's go to chapter 10. So chapter 10 and there. So where is this in the other books? Is this a change that has taken place recently? I guess that's my question. Is this something they have added and is not in one of the main books? Because that's a bit of a problem. If it is in the basic rules in chapter 10, where does it exist in the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master Guide? And under what section does it actually sit? Casting and armor, verbal components, duration, weaving a magic, Yep. So yeah, so it's somewhere in chapter 10 isn't going to be very helpful. Under what heading in chapter 10? Because chapter 10 is a big chapter. Do you know what I mean? We've got combining magic, we've got transmutation schools of magic, attack rolls, saving throws. For the life of me, I don't see anywhere whatsoever that indicates any of that. And it's all very well if they stick in the basic rules, but you know, if it's nowhere else but in the basic rules on D&D Beyond, it really doesn't exist. You know what I mean? The only time the rule exists is when it's in your book, in your hand, at your table. Unless, of course, you use D&D Beyond exclusively. And see, that's always been my approach, is like, Wizards of the Coast can change stuff, but if it's not in the book that I purchased, it doesn't exist. Do you know what I mean? Because they can keep changing things till the cows go home, but that doesn't actually mean anything to anybody. When you buy a product, you kind of expect things to stay the same. And yes, I don't see anywhere in here. I'm looking through. So what part of chapter 10 is the big question? Yep. How's it going, Dynamancer? Also a patron. Hello, how are you doing? Casting a spell at higher level. Nacho. Let's have a look at casting a spell at higher level. Casting a spell at higher level. Casting a spell at higher level. When a spellcaster casts a spell using a slot that is at a higher level than the spell assumes the higher level for the casting. So when a spell casts a spell using a slot that is of a higher level than the spell assumes the yeah. Let's have a look at this section. I am curious now. Before I disappear, let's have a look at this thing. Let's see if this actually says what is being suggested. Because I suspect it doesn't. But we'll have a look and see what it says. Let's read it out and see if this actually says what is suggested here. For me, I'm not convinced. When a spellcaster casts a spell using a slot that is of a higher level than the spell assumes the higher level for that casting. Okay. All right. For instance, if Irma casts Magic Missile using one of her second level slots, that Magic Missile is second level. Okay, so that's fine. Effectively, the spell expands to fill the slot as it's put into. Okay, so that's fine. So that's that bit. Next, some spells such as Magic Missile and Cure Wound have more powerful effects when cast at higher level, as detailed in the spell's description. All right, there's nothing about any of that there. Let's have a look to see if we're actually getting anywhere. So far, I have seen nothing to suggest any of what that is saying. Because of the mental focus and precise gestures required, no, that doesn't say anything about what we're looking for. Under cantrips, it won't have anything there. Ritual casting, it's not going to have anything there. Casting a spell, so we're moving into spell casting full stop. So we've got but what's the title? What are we looking for? Casting a spell. Nothing there. Casting time, bonus action, reaction, long time casting, nothing there. Casting an armor. Range spells, doesn't have anything there. Components, doesn't have anything there either. There's nothing about that anywhere there. Instantaneous, concentration. Nothing there either. All right. Not a squat. Targets, nothing. A clear path to your target. There's nothing underneath that. Targeting yourself, nothing there. The weave of magic. Is there something in the weave of magic that is talking about this? Casting a spell from a scroll at a higher level. Nothing there. Area effect. Nothing in that section. Cylinder. Sphere. Nothing. Saving throws. We've got the calculation for that. We've got attack rolls. Okay. Nothing there. Combining effects. Nothing there. There's nothing there, people. So unless you actually can, unless you can actually specify the exact page in the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master Guide with the actual title that says this, it doesn't exist. Okay. So I'm not going to dump down on anybody, but you've got. I think the problem is, and I've suffered from the same problem. Okay, is a lot of the rules that I remember are from older versions of the game, particularly 3.5, because I played enough of 3.5 and Pathfinder to have those rules sort of smashed into my brain enough, and we kind of assume that they work the same, and it's not. So Nacho, you haven't created confusion. Well, yeah. Only question I have, multi-classing casters and spell slots, do they have the new classes spell slots and leave everything else the same? Oh God. Okay, I'll answer the question before I go on my break. Let me do that. I'm gonna close this window because it's really off-putting. Oh God, that was too much to deal with. Okay, right, let's do that, and let's go over here. So it should be coming back to my face in a second, instead of the other thing that you had to contend with, which was the layers of me looking at the chat and the rules. Too much to deal with. All right, there we go. We're back. Okay. Multi-classing casters and spell slots. Do you have the new classes spell slots and leave everything else the same? So this is a problem, and Jeremy Crawford has addressed this. So multi-classing is like a giant mess. It's confusing. There is a specific way of doing it. Do I agree with it? If anything, it's one of the biggest reasons why I think multiclassing is a great, huge, giant pile of shite. And I love playing spellcasters, people. And yes, I do. I have multiclassed. I'm not a huge fan of multiclassing, but since our classes don't do what we want them to do, we kind of have to multiclass, don't we? So I think the easiest way is to go to the player's handbook, not the basic rules, and have a look at multiclassing and what it actually says there. I think that's the easiest way to contend with that, because usually you'll find that it's there, right? And you're talking about your spell slots. And there's a section under multiclassing. It is on chapter 6 of the player's handbook, and you'll find it under spell slots, spells known, and spells prepared. Okay, it's there. That whole section there answers that question, and I'm going to go and have a small break while you guys figure out how to respond to what I just said. Okay, so I will be back. I will answer the question. So, okay, page 200 of the Dungeon Master Guide. Okay, so he's found it in a real book. Okay, Big Clues found it, 200. Here we go. Let's have a look at. I'm opening a real book, page 200. Now, page 200. Here we go. So this is under spell scrolls in the magic area. So probably one of the hardest places to find this rule. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't know how this is supposed to work, I would not be surprised. Because let's get real, it is in a god-awful place to position it. It is probably the worst place you could position it. In a book, and it's actually part. The rules are sitting in a magic item of all places to put it. It's a terrible idea, but apparently we've done that. So let's go to magic items. Magic items. I believe I need to go to magic items number. Cursed. No, go back. It's S. It's under S under spell scroll. Spell scroll. So let's go to spell scroll. Spell scroll. So this is where it is on D&D Beyond. Spell scroll. And I will talk about that when I've gone and taken a piss. Okay? We'll talk about a rule where you stick it as part of a magic item. For me, almost immediately when I see something like this, I consider this a variant rule. Okay? Because it's not in the right place. And is it actually written as this is the way to do it? Or is it this is a suggestion? Do you know what I mean? And a lot of rules are just a suggestion. So we'll come back to that. I'm going to let Arnold look after you while I go take a quick break. here we go. Coming back in. Let's deal with spell scrolls before I have to go to work. I need a water. And let's see what big clue is found for us in our endeavours to discover the truth of how confusing and difficult this game is to contend with. What is the chat saying right now? Anyway. Hey Fred, Dynamancer. I just don't dip due to the unknown areas of multiclassing. Yeah, I get it. Paragraph 2 under Spell Scroll, entry in the Magic Item section of the Dungeon Master Guide, which I just want to point out right now again that putting Spell Scrolls in that section is utterly ridiculous. This ended up as a bit of an argument at the table. So it's not an argument at the table. So nothing in the rules says that you can't change it. And for me, almost immediately, I know where this rule comes from. It comes from 3.5. I always considered it garbage to begin with. It actually makes no sense whatsoever. But let's deal with the reality that it does exist, and instead let's talk to that point and have a look at see what it says. I think that's the best way to go. So, what we are looking at here is basically the question around, can you cast a spell from a scroll that is a higher level than you can actually cast as a spellcaster? So if you can't cast level 3 spells, but you have a scroll that's at level 3, can you actually cast that spell? Okay, let's have a look at what that looks like. And we'll go from there. Now, to find the section, again, I will point out it's in the Dungeon Master Guide on page 20 in the chapter 7 in the treasure section, not in the information on magic items or spell casting. It's not even in the player's handbook. It's in the magic item section of the book. Do you know, I want to make it clear to those of you who are players and dungeon masters, anything in the treasure section is a variant rule. None of that needs to be used by a dungeon master. It's completely up to them. It is not yours as players. That is all dungeon master stuff. You get to refer to this stuff if they decide to use it. But that whole section on spell scrolls, that doesn't belong to you. It is not even official. It is essentially there. The magic items are a suggestion that dungeon masters could use in their game. That's all they are. So then when I say this is essentially a variant rule, even if it's not listed as a variant rule, all magic items are variants. They are optional. They are suggestions. So you do not need to feel bad if you don't use this. In fact, it's quite all right to ignore it completely. So let's read the section and see what it says, since it's actually under the magic item section. Spell scroll. This is what it says. Scrolls vary. A scroll spell bears the words of a single spell, written in a mystical cipher. If the spell is on your class's spell list, okay, so it has to be on your spell list, you can read the scroll and cast its spell without providing any material components, because the material components are in the scroll. Otherwise, the scroll is unintelligible, okay? So, in other words, it needs to be on your spell list for your class. Okay? If it's not there, you can't do nothing with it. Casting the spell by reading the scroll requires the spell's normal casting time. So in other words, whatever the normal casting time of the spell, when you're using the scroll, it's the same. Once the spell is cast, the words on the scroll fade and it crumbles to dust. So you get to use the scroll once and it's gone. If the casting is interrupted, the scroll is lost. Okay, so you still lose the scroll and you don't get to, so you don't get interrupted. If the spell is on your class list, but of a higher level than you can normally cast, you must make a ability check using your spell casting ability to determine whether you cast it successfully. Okay, So it is actually stated here under this section, again in the treasure section, which is not a player tool and not, it is not like this is the default. This you can consider as just a suggestion, dude. That's all it is. What they've put forward is the DC is 10 plus the spell's level. So if you're trying to cast a level 3 spell, okay, and you don't actually have the ability to cast level 3 spells because you're not that high enough level, then it would be 10 plus 3 if it's a level 3 spell. So it'll be a DC 13. On a failed check, the spell disappears from the scroll with no other effect. Once the spell is cast, the words on the scroll fade and the scroll crumbles to dust. We've already seen this. The level of the spell on the scroll determines the spell saving throw DC. Okay. And the attack bonus, as well as the scroll's rarity as shown in this thing. So this is basically giving you a chart of what that would look like. Now that we know what the DCs are, they've given us a list of what the DCs would be and the attack bonuses would be for this. Let's keep reading. A wizard spell on a spell scroll can be copied just as spells in a spell book can be copied. When a spell is copied from a spell scroll, the copier must succeed on an intelligence arcane check with a DC equal to 10 plus the spell's level. Okay, so if it's a level 1 spell, it'll be DC 11. If it's a level 3 spell, it'll be a DC 13. If the check succeeds, the spell is successfully copied. Whether the check succeeds or fails, the spell scroll is destroyed. So, under this section, which is totally you as a dungeon master, you get to decide. This rule only exists if you want it to exist. Do you know what I mean? Because let's have a look at that. What that means. If we're dealing with a level 3 scroll, and it's say Fireball, and the DC is 13, what does that ultimately mean? Okay, we're making an ability check to use the spell ability on there. So what's the ability check that we're making? What's the ability check that we're making? Have you ever had a look at that? You can make an ability check using your spell casting ability to determine. So if you're a wizard, it would be an intelligence ability check. So your intelligence is normally going to be probably at level 1, A3. And so 50% of the time it would be possible to do this. So it's actually pretty easy. If you're dealing with, say, you're level 1 and you're dealing with a level 2 spell, the DC would only be 12. If it was a level 3 spell, the DC is only a 13. Straight away, this is the sort of thing that I would ignore. I would just say, no, it doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? Again, I'll reiterate to people, anything in the Dungeon Master Guide is a guide for the Dungeon Master, not for overall, that's how we do things. It is a suggestion. Okay, so there is clearly some guidance around doing this if you want to do it that way. So whether you use it or not, or whether you don't use it or not, that's up to you as a dungeon master. And that's the end of it. So yes, you can. I've had this argument at my own table. We had this argument with me and some players. I had the current dungeon master, who isn't me, had the same argument or discussion with the players at my table. Some of us were fine with it, some of us weren't. Basically, my current dungeon master does not use this. He does not use this. If you can't cast a spell at that level, he says it does not make sense that you can cast a spell at a higher level than you actually understand how to actually perform. He doesn't do that. Now, half my group accepted that, and I think there's 1 or 2 people who were like a little bit iffy. But as a general rule, because we're mature and we are adults, we could say the dungeon master gets to make the rules. Because all of us in my home group, we're all dungeon masters. Okay, every single one of us is actually a dungeon master, and I think there's only one person who's never dungeon mastered in the game. Now, how do I rule this? I am aware of this because one of my friends did point it out to me. But again, I consider this a variant option. I consider this a tool that a dungeon master can use if you want to. Yeah. They have it here because also the rogue has got a special ability, the ability to actually use magic items, and one of them is reading a spell off a scroll. So they probably needed to have some maths around that as well. But it's also another good example of Wizards of the Coast really doing a bad job of organising their books. So yes, don't feel bad if you don't use this, because it is in the treasure section of the Dungeon Master Guide. It is. Consider it a suggestion. It is something put forward. Nothing, as I said, nothing in the treasure section of the Dungeon Master Guide is the way you have to do it. Not modify ability. It's going to be an ability check. It'll just be the modifier. Okay, and you roll 20-sided dice. No proficiency, no. But that's, again, so no, you don't have to feel sorry for the distraction, people. This is why we do these things. This is why we ask these questions. This is what this is all about. So it does exist. It's in the treasure section. It's in the Dungeon Master Guide. It's on page 200. It's in chapter 7. It is part of the section on treasure. Okay, and again, it is a guide to give something for the Dungeon Master. See, for me, I would see that and consider that unacceptable, because that's not hard enough. It's too easy to perform. Even if I was going to allow it, I wouldn't do it. You can say, because it's in a book, it's an official rule and a Dungeon Master has to use the official rules. No, they don't. They just don't. I run a channel that has predominantly tried to teach people the basics of Dungeons and Dragons. Well, everybody is going to have to come to the understanding that what Wizards of the Coast puts forward is just your starting point. Okay? It's just your starting point. It is not what you necessarily have to do. Okay, so now we had a question around multi-classing, was it not? Okay, so Nacho, were you were looking for clarification? Was it on the scroll spell or was it the multi-classing aspect? Multi-classing. So I've also had arguments at the table around multi-classing and how multi-classing should work. Okay, so I think I found the section on multi-classing and spellcasting. Features, light, yeah, here I did. I found it's chapter 6 under customization options, and we have a section that talks about spells known, spell slots, and how they work. So let's go have a look at this, since this is definitely a contentious one. And we don't do it necessarily the way the book says, because again, the book is kind of crap, if you ask me. Do you know what I mean? It's really not that great. Anyway, let's have a look at this. I can't tell you. Can I tell you exactly what page it is? I don't know if I can, but we'll see. If it's under spells known and spells prepared and then spell slots. So that'll be 6. Let's see if I can get the page number for you. Chapter 6, part 6, using abilities. Come on. Customizing options. Here we go. So the page in the player's handbook for this is on page 164, and it is under spellcasting. This is for multi-classing people, multi-classing spellcasting. So this is what it says. Your capacity for spellcasting depends partly on your combined levels in all your spellcasting classes and partly on your individual levels in those classes. Once you have the spellcasting feature from more than one class, use the rules below if you multi-class, but have the spellcasting feature from only one class. You follow the rules as described in that class. So, everything in this section is for multi-classing, okay? if you have multiclassed into only one spellcasting class. So if you multiclass the section here, let me just highlight this a bit. If you multiclass but have the spellcasting feature from only one class, so it only applies if you multiclassed and say fighter and then into a spellcaster, you follow the rules as described in that class. Okay? Alright. So, in other words, we're following the rules that already exist in the class. Right, so here we go. Right, so here we go. You determine what spells you know and can prepare from each class individually. So in other words, your preparing of spells, okay, can be separated. And you can make them individual and separated from the class. Yeah? As if you were a single class member of that class. So that is a very confusing sentence. You determine what spells you know, okay, cool, and can prepare for each class individually. All right, so you can do it individually, as if you were a single class member of that class. So, for example, if you are a ranger level 4 and a wizard level 3, for example, you would know 3 first level ranger spells based on your level in the ranger class. Okay, so we know that. As a 3rd level wizard, you know 4 wizard cantrips, and your spell book contains 10 wizard spells, 2 of which, the 2 you gain when you reach level 3 as a wizard. Okay, so can be 2nd level spells. So it is going to be a can of worms. I understand why it's so confusing. If your intelligence is 16, you can prepare 6 wizard spells from your spell book. Where we get that from, okay, if your intelligence is 16, so basically what we're looking at here is your 3rd level wizard plus your intelligence modifier, which is a 3. So we come out with preparing 6 wizard spells from your spell book. Each spell you know and prepare is associated with one of the classes, and you use the spell casting ability of that class when you cast the spell. Okay, that's simple enough. Similarly, a spell caster focus such as a holy symbol can be only used for spells from the class associated with that focus. So if you were to multi-class into cleric and wizard, then you have to use the wizard focus for the wizard spells and the cleric focus for the cleric spells, or holy symbol in this case. If a cantrip of yours increases in power at higher levels, the increase is based on your character level, not your level in the particular class. So the only thing that's really unaffected by your class, the classes that you have selected when you multi-class, is a cantrip, because it's always going to be based on character level. Okay, character level being the overall number of levels you have in all the classes you have selected. Okay, so this is probably where we're starting to head into the stuff you wanted to talk about. Spell slots. You determine your available spell slots by adding together all levels in Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, and Wizard classes. Half your levels rounded down. So here's that's a different sentence. That should have been separated, okay? So you determine your available spell slots by adding together all your levels in Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, and Wizard. Now, the reason I've said that is those are full spellcasters, correct? And the multi-class table for for spells, if you have a look in the book on page 265, you should find that particular table is absolutely identical, and it is I believe it is identical in every way to any of the full spellcasters. Right, but what we are dealing with, if you're dealing with a spellcaster who is a paladin or a ranger, then that's different. Half your level, rounded down. That's how many spell slots we're going to get. So half your level, because they're considered half casters. So take whatever levels you have in paladin and ranger, add them together, and then halve it. That's how many spells you can, how many slots you get. Right, that's relatively simple. And a third of your fighter or rogue levels rounded down if you have the Eldritch Knight or Arcane Trickster feature. This is all in one sentence. No wonder people get confused. So when it comes to working out how many spell slots you have, if you are fighter, have rogue levels, or you have the Eldritch Knight or the Arcane Trickster feature, because those are the sort of the magical aspects of it. We're dealing with we're talking with a 1/3 caster. So we're going to be dividing that by 3. So you take the levels in fighter and rogue, add them together, divide it by 3. That is how many spell slots you get. Use this total to determine your spell slots by consulting the multi-class spellcaster table. Okay? So that's what we're looking at here. This here in itself is one of the reasons why I think multi-classing just should not exist. Do you know what I mean? Okay, here we go. If you have more than one spellcasting class, this table might give you spell slots of a level that is higher than the spells you know or prepared. So, here we go. If you have more than one spellcasting class, okay, so in other words, you take more than one spellcasting class, say it's cleric or wizard, this table might give you spell slots of a level that is higher than the spells you know or can prepare. Right, because this table apparently could work that way. You can use these slots, but only to cast your low-level spells. So in other words, you have to upcast them. All right, so if a low-level spell that you cast, like Burning Hands, had an enhanced effect, when casting using a high-level slot, you can use the enhanced effect. Okay, so that makes it even more complicated. So apparently we get the spell at its lowest level that you know for your for whatever spellcaster you've selected, but you still get the effect. Okay. It has an enhanced effect that can cast using a higher level slot. You can use the enhanced effect, even though you don't have any spells of that higher level. So in other words, are you starting to see why discussions around this are a giant pain in the butt? So, for example, if you are aforementioned, I'm not even going to go even more into any of this. I want to go back to my head, and before I go to work, I just want to tell you guys what I have to say. I love playing spellcasters, people, but I think there's a point where we have to understand that Wizards of the Coast has not given us a satisfactory set of rules to contend with multi-classing and spellcasting. Okay? All the other stuff with regard to multi-classing into different levels, it's all right. It's not great, it's all right. When it comes to spellcasting, do you know what we did? In the end, this is what we wound up doing. I have different wording from D&D Beyond. Well, that's interesting, because I almost read exactly from there. So that's interesting. How's that? How did that work? How did I get different wording on my screen compared to your D&D Beyond? So this is what I do with multi-classing. I consider all of the shit that Wizards of the Coast created on multi-classing garbage, particularly when it comes to spellcasting. This is what I do. you multi-class. And all we do is we just look at if you get a certain number of levels in wizard and a certain number of levels in cleric, all we do is we figure out roughly how many spells you can prepare from each class separately. How many slots we use and whether we can use those slots for cleric spells or wizard spells, we don't even worry about it. As long as if I've got 4 levels in wizard, for example, and I've got 4 levels in cleric, then that essentially means that I am able to cast 4 level 1 spells, okay, from the wizard, and 4 level 1 spells from the cleric. And I can cast 3 level 2 spells from the wizard and 3 level 2 spells from the cleric. Overall, I just take the number. When we're doing our multi-classing, I take the number, and if I bunch all of the level 1 spell slots together. So if the wizard gets 4 at level 1, at level 4, with a level 4 wizard, and I get 4 level 1 spells, and I'm getting 4 level 1 spells for the cleric at level 4, then I have 8 level 1 spells to play with. And if I have 3 from the wizard at level 4 and 3 from the cleric at level 4 at level 2, then those level 2 spells, I put them together and go 3 and 3 becomes 6. And I can use those second level spells for whatever the hell I like, provided I have access and prepared that spell. That's all we do in our games. Same thing with level 1. It is the easiest way. We had to figure out how to streamline it some way. Right now, the rules are awful. I don't think you're going to get anything from me other than it's a giant mess. Multi-classing is there's a good reason why dungeon masters hate it. Do you know what I mean? They could have at least provided spell tables to visually express what they were babbling about. If you read the instructions on it, it's utter rubbish. A couple of my friends have read through it a couple of times, and we keep looking at it, and we're like, it's so bad. We just made our own stuff up. It's so bad. And it doesn't make sense. It's really, really stupid. So at this point, we still have people in our group that multi-class. It does happen. Even I multi-class. But we adjudicate it very differently to the book. Because the book will fail you. I can assure you now. So yes, if you're a dungeon master and you've got players at the table, just tell them we're not running multi-classing the way that's in the player's handbook, because it's shit. Okay? And if you're a player and your dungeon master says this to you, you just accept it, because they're right. They really are. What's in the book is garbage. It's really bad. Anyway, I'm going to get going. I think I've ranted enough. Hopefully we will have much more positive things to say near the end of a stream when we're dealing with Dragonlance, War of the Shadow of the Dragon Queen tomorrow, which is going to happen. So also too, I should mention that there will be a second live stream tomorrow. This will be on Go Live Together. It will be mobile. I'll be using a mobile phone. So will Jordan from Flute Salute. We'll be talking about Unearthed Arcana Cleric and the revised species. But although we will talk very briefly about that, because I know Jordan can do that in about 6 minutes out of the hour that we're going to use, in truth, I want to talk about what I would like to see the cleric be able to do in the game. And that's really what Jordan wants to talk about as well, really. I think you'll find that's going to be our biggest focus. We don't really care what Wizards of the Coast is doing. We just know what we would like to see the cleric be able to do. So, yeah. So, yes, hopefully this was not too scary for people. Anyway, I've basically told you 2 rules are garbage, or one is a variant rule and not really there unless the dungeon master wants it, and the other one is unusable. I don't know how useful it is going to be during a live stream, but anyway, okay, so thank you to all of my patrons who support me so I can keep running this program. Thank you to everybody who's taken part in the live stream. Thank you for Big Clue for pointing out the section in the book with regard to this. No, John, I did not buy the Dragonlance book. but you will see it all tomorrow, okay? As I said, somebody else purchased it for me on D&D Beyond. So thank you to Big Clue for pointing out where it was and for somebody being able to nail down exactly what we were dealing with here. So we've actually covered some fairly hot topics, things that I've seen at my table go haywire for a long time. No, you didn't make me angry, but I just, the scroll stuff and the multi-classing and spellcasting stuff is so bad. It's there's times when you just have to look at the stuff and you need to put it aside and say, just Wizards of the Coast didn't know what to do with it, okay? And so yeah. Anyway. It's only a game rule. Who cares? In the grand scheme of things, it's really not that important. So thank you to everybody who's been taking part in the live stream. And thank you to everybody who took part and watched. I do appreciate it. Thank you for rewatching my live streams, my edited videos, and putting up with my my YouTube shorts. I kind of have to do them. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. And oh my gosh, it's time to get a chill pill, Fred. Time to get a chill pill.